A Texas sheriff has opened an investigation into the decision to transport dozens of migrants to Martha's Vineyard. He says it appears the migrants were lured to the island under false pretenses. Meanwhile, the number of migrants coming to the border is approaching record highs. CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bojorquez is in El Paso, Texas. Manny, just how is this city coping with the influx?
Well, Anne-Marie, for one, they are trying to prevent people from having to sleep out on these streets outside this Greyhound bus station where for days dozens of migrants, many of them without food, water, or money to reach their next destination, camped out. The city has been trying to move people to shelters and motels. For many migrants seeking asylum in the U.S., this is their first stop, a Greyhound bus station in El Paso, Texas. The U.S. Border Patrol says more than 1,000 migrants are crossing this area each day. Many are being released here. That's where volunteer Juliana Esparza Loya pulls in with her minivan loaded with supplies. She sets up her table and starts handing out essentials like backpacks, shoes, and clothes for children and adults who often arrive with only the clothes on their backs. She told us she grew up in El Paso with very little, and she identifies with the migrant struggles. For her, this issue has little to do with politics.
You vote for Republican or Democrat, it's still not changing. The problem is still here. How could people live out here for 4 or 5 days? They had to rely on good-hearted people to come and give their 3-month-old a blanket and a tent, and it shouldn't be that way.
Now, the city of El Paso has set up this migrant welcome center where they provide Wi-Fi to contact their sponsor families, food, shelter, and most importantly, transportation to their next stop.
You're getting an average of 400 people a day?
Yes, sir. Right.
That's a lot.
That's going to be increasing shortly.
So you don't see this slowing down at this point?
At this point, we're just managing the numbers as they come in.
The asylum seekers here are mostly from Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, countries with no diplomatic ties to the U.S. and therefore no quick way to deport them. Marielba Atencio and her 3-year-old son are trying to get to relatives in New York after fleeing what she describes as life or death situations in Venezuela.
¿Fue cosa de vida y muerte para ustedes? It's a life and death thing? Because you can get sick and there's no medicine. Se enferma uno.
Some here see the next step of their voyage laid out for the first time.
And you're looking how far it is to get to New York. Quiere ir a Nueva York.
El Paso has sent nearly 60 buses with migrants north, but the city says it is closely coordinating with local leaders and charitable organizations at those destinations to ensure that they are ready to receive those migrants. That is unlike some GOP governors who are accused of sending migrants with little to no warning. Anne-Marie?
Indeed, Manny. Listen, we've been talking about this increase in migrants. Apparently, so far this year, more than 2 million migrants have been processed. That's a lot. Customs and Border Patrol was already overwhelmed. How are they handling this increase?
Right, that 2 million figure, more than 2 million, is a record largely fueled by migration from Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. These are countries where it's not easy for the United States to repatriate people. As far as CBP, they are in charge of processing people when they present themselves to those officers and those agents. They screen them, and if they do qualify at this point to proceed on with an asylum claim, as many of the people here have, then they release them. They bring them to areas like this. The problem is CBP doesn't have the ability to house them or help them get to the next step. And that's where the cities are overwhelmed, where El Paso is trying to do its best, and where charitable organizations are also trying to step in.
I'm just curious about how these migrants are feeling right now. You know, they're enjoying sort of the hospitality of some really generous people. But just looking at that one gentleman, looking at the map and seeing how far New York was, you really realize just how much they have to learn about the hurdles that they face in this country. Are they optimistic or are they anxious?
You know, the bottom line is right now they're grateful. They're grateful that they have a bed, that they have shelter, and that they have a bus, whether it's the city of El Paso or some of the other buses that are leaving Texas. They've expressed to us that they're just happy to be here, that they're uncertain still about what lies ahead, about those court proceedings and whether they will be allowed to stay long term. But after the journey they've been on, some of them are telling me they've been basically walking or on buses or trains for a month now after leaving Venezuela, for example, crossing the Darien Gap, that dangerous stretch of jungle in Panama. They're just grateful to have somebody here that's trying to help them out.
All right, Manny, thank you very much.
Thank you.